So hey guys, it's me Misha, and today we are going to talk about my five favorite directors. Forgive me if I'm a bit tired. Um, so I made a list of my five favorite all-time favorite directors and directors who have motivated me, inspired me, or helped me, give a catalyst for different techniques they've used or just influenced some of my own stuff I do. There's many different reasons why these top five people have been an influence in my career, an influence in my life, and helped shape some of the parts that are me into what I do and what I direct and what I try to make. So first on the list, number one is no surprise, Steven Spielberg. There's many reasons why. I think Steven Spielberg, sorry, I live next to a military base, so if you hear jets flying over, just forgive that. Um, but Steven Spielberg, um, I think one of the main reasons why I really love what he does and how he directs is he reminds me of myself. I'm a very giving, caring individual, and I have a big heart, and I can tell that Master Spielberg has a lot of heart and passion that drives his inspirations too. There are a lot of different directors with a lot of different type of heart and soul that put into their projects differently, but I feel like I like his way of inspiration because he seems like such a generous person. He seems like such a grounded person, such a person that just someone that's very down to earth and I admire that and I connect to that very sincerely since that's how I am. I don't know him personally, and if I did meet him in person, I would probably cry. Um, I don't know if you guys knew this, but when Steven Spielberg was like 22, 21, um, he snuck onto the Universal's backlot and he went there for a whole summer and he snuck onto the actual Universal Studios backlot for a whole summer until he got caught. And that's kind of then he was kind of offered a job, kind of so to speak, and it's interesting, you can't necessarily do that nowadays because, there's a lot more security and people can't just go wandering on the backlots like I guess Steven could do back then. Times were different. But I just find that to be so cool and he was still figuring himself out, I guess, and at the time he's making a lot of backyard home movies, and that's the second purpose why I find him such an inspiration, is because even though I'm using on digital cameras now in 2017, back then he tells stories how he would physically cut his films with Super 8 millimeter and stuff, and I know J.J. Abrams did kind of the same thing as Steven did, but J.J. Abrams is not on my top five list. I'll talk about J.J. in another episode, but I also like Steven Spielberg because he moves the camera. He moves the camera around a lot, and I do the same thing. I act as if the camera is an extension of the world. Like I'm not afraid to move the camera around, from going to a really tight close up to dolling out or trying to jib up to a wide and showing things and just and using the camera as an arm, so to speak, to just vastly show this entire film universe you're trying to make, and I love how Steven isn't so grounded as some directors are. Like I know some directors are very iconic to just having very stationary shots or are very by the book. I have never been that way. I've always loved to just move the camera around people, and that's another big the reason why I love Steven Spielberg's film so much is he moves the camera around so openly, um, and so creatively too. I think another last reason why I love Steven Spielberg is because he reminds me of myself because he just seems to have such an open soul. He seems to be very he talks about his project a lot, which I feel like a lot of directors don't sometimes. I feel like some directors don't talk about their projects that much, but I feel like he's a bit more open than some other directors, and I admire that very much. But anyway, on to the next person, the next filmmaker. Um, Number two favorite, my favorite two favorite director is is Tim Burton. Tim Burton has been a huge influence in my own stuff, but the number one reason why I love Tim Burton so much um, is because who he is. He embraces the fact that he's different, and I love that so much. That he sees his ideas so differently than everybody else, and he's not ashamed or embarrassed of it. If you watch a lot of his interviews, he talks a lot about how he doesn't like people who frown upon people who are different or strange or odd. He embraces the unusual in the world, and that's what I love most about him as a person, even though I don't know him, personally, but I just admire that he's so open to just embracing people and ideas and cultures that are taboo or are not the norm. And, I love that mentality and that sense of pride to just be comfortable with oneself that way is very dignifying, and I respect that tremendously. As far as his artistic stylings, I um I am a lover of black and white photography and film, and I love it when directors like Tim Burton have a lot of dark shadows, very nuanced film noir type vibes and stylings, and I love how he's so creative with the way he brings these unusual environments and characters all together, with embracing his differences with how he likes to see things and how he interprets that into film and shows his character as being, you know, the black sheep or the odd ducks or the unusual or abstract. I admire that in his art, and I admire the very dark nature of where he you know derives all that motivation from. I think it's very unusual and is very captivating, and I admire that very much. And I think the third reason why I love Tim Burton is, again, I don't know these people personally, but I've watched some interviews of him, and not saying I don't know him personally. People can be completely different people when they're off camera, but he seems like he's a very compassionate person. He seems like he just has a very open heart, and he speaks his mind, and he seems to be very nurturing and understanding towards other people, and I admire that greatly. My third favorite director is of course Christopher Nolan, the infamous Dark Knight filmmaker who made Batman Begins, The Dark Knight, and The Dark Knight Rises series. If you don't know any of his other films he's done Memento, and he's done um, um, The Prestige, which is a magic film, and he's done I know there's one with Robin Williams and Al Pacino. I think it's called uh Insomnia, which is good too. So check out all his other stuff. I mean, he does fantastic stuff. He and I love his stuff so much because he is a good entrepreneur, and I admire like him and his brother are very family operated. He works alongside his younger or older brother. I don't know which one, but if he's younger or older than him. But his brother helps him write the scripts. I think his wife helps produce them or something. So um, I like how he's very family oriented and has people that he trusts in his movies. I admire that a lot. I like to see it when directors use the same people because that means, they're trusting people who are like family to them. And I feel like that's the best way to go most times is because it's good to have a sense of family on set, to make everybody feel comfortable. Sometimes I admire that. I think as far as his art goes and how he filmmakes, I think nothing's really different with how he moves the camera or anything, but I think he just has a very good sense of the flow of film and how and the timing, the pacing of the cuts, and I think he's just naturally is very in tune with making a movie that's a big spectacle and well, just more importantly, what I'm trying to say is he's very good at telling very interesting stories, like very thought-provoking stories that really make people get involved and invested in his characters, and he's very good at making you go on this ride, this big roller coaster through his universes and his stories, and I think that's a wonderful quality. And so I admire that of him very much. The fourth, my fourth favorite director is Alfred Hitchcock, the master of suspense. When I first started to make movies, I was kind of like on a horror movie thrill ride. I loved to make horror movies, B movies when I was back in high school, and that's something that my friends and I did a lot. We would go to Walmart, buy corn syrup and red food coloring, and make these backyard B movies and horror films, and eventually I kind of as I got older I wanted to step away from that and make it stuff that was more, sorry, forget the Jets, was more inspirational and motivational and had deeper meaning than people being chopped up alive or being splattered all over the place. There's nothing wrong about that. There's good fun in making those type of movies, but I love Alfred Hitchcock because not necessarily the gore and the suspense and the mood and the moods of his films, but just simply because he's very good at, at suspense. He's very good at, the best quote he ever said was, there's no suspense on a bus if, like, well, I can't say that well, but he said the way that you make suspense is if you have a bus full of people and the audience doesn't know that that a bomb is on the bus, there's no suspense. But if the audience knows that there's a bomb on a bus about to go off, and no one on the bus knows, but the audience knows, that makes very good suspense. And I admire and respect how that he understands um, that process, that flow of constant sign up and payoff of suspense. I think it's amazing how he does that. If you don't know, Alfred Hitchcock made movies such as Psycho, the famous Psycho scene with Norman Bates, and uh, um, and North by Northwest, I think, and Rear Window, which is great, and Vertigo, and The Birds, and I love how he just embraces that genre so much, and I admire that, and whenever I'm trying to pull those feelings of emotion out in my stuff, and especially if I'm directing a scene that's more dark and dark and just dark. I try to take inspiration from, it's better to give the audience something that they know and the characters don't know for a bigger payoff to a suspense scene or anything like that. I think it's great. The fifth and final favorite director of all time would be Stanley Kubrick. I love Stanley Kubrick because, hold on, there's jets flying over. I love Stanley Kubrick's stuff because he's very specific with detail. And am I that specific with detail myself? No. I've heard stories of him asking actors to do like 100 and something takes. Personally, I think that's a bit overkill, but the fact that he's so specific with how he sees it so clearly in his head, I think that's a clear gift, and I think and I do love, the ambiance of his films, and I some of his films are not quite my taste, but I really admire, his motivation to always just, you know, Stanley Kubrick's directing and his movies remind me of going to a really nice art gallery. Um, because at an art gallery, you're standing there and you're looking at this array of art along these walls. And that's what his filmmaking reminds me of is like he pays so much attention to so much detail through every frame, and he takes so much time, and he cares so much about having the perfect takes, the perfect cuts, that just everything to be so specific and perfect. I think that's how I see his stuff is just very precise, like like insanely nitpicky and precise. But I think that's why I love his stuff, is that I'm not that way at all. You know, I could care less if something was, not perfect. I would just, I'm a bit more open to just let things roll and, just, I'm not as nitpicky as I guess he was, but so to speak. But I admire his attention to detail, and I admire how he uses the camera with all of his wide shots. I think that's a very interesting aspect on how he built his cinematography around that, and showing these very wide angles and showing characters move through hallways and physical spaces. There are a lot of different very interesting aspects to his cinematography and his filmography, and I just find that very fascinating. But anyway, that was my top five favorite directors, and hopefully some of you guys like some of these people and find interest and also intrigued and are inspired by their art and their films. Anyway, guys, I'm sorry about the Jets. I live right next to a military base. But anyway, guys, I wanted to just come on here and talk about some of my favorite filmmakers and why they inspire me and how I use their films or things that their films have inspired me to help motivate my own films and art. All right, guys, I'm Misha Haynie signing off, and I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day. All right, go and make something great. Love you. Bye.